reward now?
Yeah, no, Leroy don't care. You know when they say like, when you're a kid and the big joke is to tell your teacher your dog ate your homework.
Mm-hmm.
Leroy actually ate Kayla's homework one day, and I had to explain that to the teacher who would not believe my poor kid. And I had to send her a picture with Leroy laying down on the floor with pieces everywhere of the homework and stuff taking out.
Yeah, like the only thing, I don't love eating like earplugs.
Oh,
Adam does that.
Luckily, they go
Search
so
them out.
easy. Yeah.
She will search them out.
I keep mine
So
hidden.
now they live in the bathroom where she can't reach them.
You like eating earplugs. But luckily, they're nice and squishy.
so after in dogs, they just eat me.
Yes.
What short clients this week?
We learned all of our bad dogs. Do all these bad things.
Oh, so you're a bad dog. Is he country surfing?
No,
Oh,
no.
oh.
My dogs are not bad. they are bad.
That's real nice.
No, they are not bad with the counter.
Right.
So, yeah, they would not dare to do that. You're like, oh, I would never. Yeah. Lemon, I don't think really likes food enough anyway, so he wouldn't really care. And Neve would, but like she likes food, but she's never tried to counter surf since she was like 8 months old.
Did you just teach her not to, or she's
Yeah.
just
Well, I did some things with her to teach her not to, and then, like, every dog is different, obviously, but for her, she learned that it was better not to counter surf because she wasn't getting things off the counter,
Right.
and then I taught her other things. So, yeah, some dogs are more determined than others, obviously, and they will forever seek things out. So sometimes it's just something you know about your dog, like my dog is going to look for the earplugs, then
Right.
we don't have the earplugs accessible.
Yeah.
So some things about counter surfing, which you all know already, is if we have a counter surfing dog, the first thing is to try to not have anything accessible to the dog on the counter. So, and this is, we always have to say it to people, even though it seems like obvious,
Yeah.
don't let your dog get things
Yeah.
off the counter, but yeah, you kind of have to say it to people to make sure they understand that your dog is getting up there and getting things off the counter, then they're getting automatically reinforced for the behavior. So even if it's, even if they get something and manage to take it away after, they still got the reward from the fact that they got up there and pulled it down.
Right.
So the best thing to make sure they don't get rewarded for jumping onto the counter or the table, whatever it is to try to keep things out of reach. And sometimes, which we were just talking about Fennel, that he doesn't necessarily care as much about the food as other things that he might be able to get and destroy. So sometimes that's worth talking about with people as well, is because the dog doesn't necessarily always care if it's food. They might get up on the surface initially because it smells like food, but if there's a random piece of paper there or a pen and they pull that down instead, that's still a reinforcement for jumping up on the counters. I want to try and make sure that there's nothing on the surface area that they can get to. For the most part, obviously nobody's perfect, but for the most part we try our best. You try harder when your dog steals something that you really wish they hadn't.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh yeah. And so then something else that I've noticed with a few dogs, which is really interesting, is when the counters are kept clear and they can't get anything from the surface, some dogs, especially dogs who really like attention from people, which is a lot of dogs, is they'll figure out it's a good way to get attention or get a reaction from their human by putting their paws up on the counter or the table. And so even if there's like they maybe even know that there's nothing that they can get, but they're like, put their feet up and wait to be told to get off, because then they got a reaction, and that's a form of attention, and so they're happy they got
So
attention.
what would you do, like, seriously, like usually I go, paws up, and drops on the floor, but it's like, I know you're not, it's like kind of attention again,
Yeah.
but you kind of got to get them off the counter.
Well, you don't actually have to. So here's the thing, is if you've done your job and kept the counter clear and you know that there's nothing there that they can get to, then I would not give them a reaction.
Just wait them
And
off.
I
Like
would
as
just,
if they're jumping on you.
Yeah.
So just wait them off.
yeah, just ignore it. But the only way that works is if we do other things to counterbalance that, to show them when they're more likely to get attention or get something else. So then, if we know, okay, we've done our job, counter's clear, table's clear, dog's getting up there, they can't get anything, that's fine, we ignore that. But other times, when we see the dog go in the kitchen or walk past the counter, walk past the table, that is an ideal time to reward them. So if they are likely to jump up, and then we see them in the area and they're just walking past, especially maybe if they're sniffing the floor, then that's better than sniffing up on the counter, is I would try and toss the reward to the dog.
Okay, so.
And in that situation, I would toss the reward, because we don't want it, again, necessarily about attention from us. We want them rewarded in the situation that they chose to be in the area of the counter or the table, and they stayed closer to the floor, and they got a reward for that.
Do you still mark it or just toss?
I would just toss. It's a little bit more casual, like they didn't do a specific thing, like a sit, where they did a specific behavior.
Like a
So,
if I just
yeah,
Like
And-
ninja feed.
yeah.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, I mean, it's okay if they see you toss it, it's just that we don't necessarily want to hand feed it, because then sometimes they're like, oh, I got a cookie from my mom, and they didn't necessarily make the association. But
Yeah.
if they get the reward in the situation, so they're in that area where there's a floor and there's a counter, and they chose to go past the counter and not investigate the counter, and we toss them a treat, then they get rewarded in the situation.
Okay, so like in my house, they go through the kitchen in between the counter 50 times a day, because that's all they have to go outside, because my yard gives them that door that's behind the kitchen.
Okay?
So they don't always counter serve.
Yeah.
And they do go through back and forth, no problem.
Yeah. If they're focused on going outside, it's probably not the same.
Okay,
I would try and look more for moments where they're just like
hanging out.
wandering around, hanging out,
Mhm.
and then they're, or maybe you're in the kitchen, too. This can also work if you're in the kitchen and your dog just like settles nearby and they're not fussing around with the counter, then we could also reward that.
Okay.
But especially, I don't know what your house is, but some people have houses where they can see their kitchen from their sitting room, say.
Mhm.
And they might be sitting in their sitting room and they can see the dog go in the kitchen, and then that way, if they see, okay, dog jumped on the counter, but I know I cleared the counter, that's fine, I'm not gonna pay any attention to that. But at another time, they see the dog go in the kitchen, dog just wandered around in the kitchen, that'd be a good time to pitch them a cookie over there.
Okay.
So it can depend sometimes on the setup of the house, but yeah, if you have that kind of situation where you can actually see the kitchen area, or depending on where the dog's trying to get up to, like sometimes it's another random table too. So if they're just in the area where they normally would investigate the surface and they don't, then we can toss them a reward. And then if they are really interested in food on the counter, for example, then if we are working in the kitchen, so chopping food or whatever, and the dog does come in the kitchen and they just kind of keep their own space and maybe at first they might be walking back and forth or whatever. You want a starting place, so you can toss them a treat on the floor as long as they're not actively jumping on the counter. And then ideally they figure out to just go and settle somewhere because they're not going to get anything directly from the counter.
When I bring groceries home, sometimes I'll just put the bag on the counter, and if I'm standing right here, Abby, one of them will come up and put like their paws up on the counter, because they're like, what do you got there? They can't get anything,
Yeah.
so what should I do in that situation then?
And yeah, well, if you're right there, and say you're doing something on the counter, or you put something on the counter, and then your dog's like pops up to see, hey, what's that? I would just casually bump
Okay,
them
that's
off.
what I do, yeah.
Yeah.
I normally don't say anything, I just
Yeah.
like we would ignore them for jumping, you just kind of
Yeah.
turn your back and move them around. and-
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah, just
so I'm not like reacting
Yeah.
directly, it's just
No,
an
yeah, just
indirect.
casually bump them off.
Yeah, okay, okay.
And now, if they, knowing that though, and this is where it's hard for some people because the dog does catch our attention when they're doing something we don't like. But if we know that I bring the groceries and put them on the counter and my dog likes to investigate, on a day that I bring the groceries and put them on the counter and the dog comes up and they're there but they don't jump, then they should get something for
Right,
that.
yeah, okay.
So then again, toss the treat on the floor,
Mhm.
so we're not feeding them directly right there at the counter, they get it tossed on the floor.
Right.
Um, oh, I was gonna say, so with dogs in the kitchen, I mean, we know it can be very useful to have the dog learn to stay on their bed in the kitchen, which that way if you are working at the counter, then they're not right there
Mhm.
at the counter being underfoot. And so that is also a good option for if you're actively doing things in the kitchen. So if you've got the dog's bed, dog can be on their bed, and you can be periodically rewarding them for staying on the bed, especially if we know they're interested in the food and the distraction of the food is there because we're working at the counter or cooking or whatever. Now, sometimes people aren't as diligent about the bed, or they don't care if the dog's in the kitchen, they just don't want the dog jumping on the counter. So that's, again, like I was saying before, just as long as the dog is in and around the area, they're not jumping, you can just toss them something on the floor.
Like most of the time, like I'll put Leroy in his like gated space
Mhm.
because like if not, he'll sit beside me beside the stove. He'll sit though and just wait for the magical food that drops on the floor. You know, everything you drop. But like, so if your dog is in the kitchen like that, and he's not talking on the counter, he's just sitting there but kind of watching.
Yeah,
Now, if something falls on the floor accidentally, is that considered a reward?
yes. Yeah, so it sounds like he's probably got rewarded, maybe accidentally, but he's got rewarded
Yeah.
for sitting and watching.
Yeah.
And so then he's probably got rewarded at this point for his patience as well, because he doesn't know when something's gonna fall.
Mhm.
But if he sits there longer and keeps waiting, then something might fall. And so if that happens, then yes, he is getting reinforced for that sitting and watching behavior.
Which is not a bad thing.
So it's not it's not bad like jumping.
Mhm.
Now, for me, I wouldn't want my dog right there sitting and watching because they beat my way. So,
That's most of the time why he's gated
Yeah.
when I cook, but like
So,
it did
yeah.
happen a few times, you know, you get up and he's just like, dude, where you going, Mom?
Yeah.
And then you're going to make a quick snack or something, and
Yes.
he's sitting right there, and then like, oh, look at a bunch of cereal on the floor. Well, there you go, buddy.
Yeah.
You know, like,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, again, at least he got rewarded for sitting and not for jumping. So it's
Yeah.
not terrible, but if he has that tendency to be right there in your space, and then, and you know, that doesn't work for you, then I would put him in his pen area.
Yeah.
Or if he's good, like you could introduce a bed in the kitchen if you
Oh,
want
there's
him
no
there.
space.
No space, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so then it just, yeah, if you know he's gonna be underfoot in the way, even though technically he's not being bad, he's sitting and waiting, but he might be a little closer than you want him to be, and so then he can go in his area. And again, sometimes depending on what kind of areas people have, also blocking, like putting, if there's a specific doorway to the kitchen, gating it with a baby gate can work for some people, so then the dog is on the other side of the gate when you're in the kitchen. And that's another situation where if you're doing stuff in the kitchen and you closed the dog out and maybe they want it to be closed, they might be likely to just hang out right on the other side of the gate. So that could be a place where you could periodically toss something to the dog over the gate so they get rewarded for being calm in their area and not being right on their foot.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yes. Alright, and then we're gonna have a foul.
Use your hat, buddy. Use your hat, buddy.
He's starting to pass out a little.
Yeah.
He likes to like holding his head up, but his eyes just like.
He's like just, right, and Jess, can you take his leash off? Ain't that no? Okay. Okay, so this game is pretty similar to the mouse game that we do in class, but they only play this game on a surface if the dog is already interested in the surface. So if they're not showing interest in a counter or table or anything, I would not play this game because we don't need to create a problem where there isn't one. But if they are already showing interest, then this is a good game to play to show them that if there is something on the surface that it's not necessarily for them, I guess I'm very smart, unless it's given to them. So when he comes over, and initially you saw that he wanted to kind of stick his nose up towards the food, so that's when I just covered up to block his access. But if he is keeping a little distance from the food, then I'm rewarding him specifically tossing the food away from the surface. So he's not going to, even though, so here, he's being good, he's sitting and he's waiting, but if I drop the reward right there, then that rewards him also just for sitting and staring at the food, which I don't necessarily want to do. So that's why I toss it away. So reward him with distance away from the surface area. I know, he's hard. So at first, he saw I was pretty close to it because I wasn't sure if he wanted to help himself. So I want to be there to block him if I need to. But then if he's catching on and I think he's not going to try and take the food, then I'm going to separate myself, because if I'm working towards this being a table, say, and I've left something there and I want my dog to know not to take it, then I want him to be able to do it without me right beside him. So just gradually moving myself away from it. Away. Oh dear, that was a bad throw, was it? There you go. Oh my, that was a little bit demanding, so I don't think you got snacks for that. Oh, thanks.
Food is too much fun.
wandering around here, and he came past the chair and he kind of sniffed the floor, and so I rewarded him for that. All the rest of the time, he's kind of trying to figure out what he should do, so he's trying to do other behaviors, yeah, which is fine, but those moments of this might be a table or a counter, and when he did kind of wander by and he didn't try and access the food, that is an ideal time to reward. He's like, but the food is over here.
It's stuff for lying down right here. Yeah, she's always been really good with leave it, because I did work pretty extensively with them when he was a puppy. So like I drop things on the floor and he just like accidentally, he just doesn't like dive bomb for it.
Yeah,
He kinda,
that's
like
it.
wander his way over. If it were to fall like right in front of him, he'd probably try to get over it. But
Yeah. Yeah, and with this one, you notice I didn't tell him to leave it, so if we're working towards the dog understanding.
yeah, like
Yeah.
usually when I do like accidentally drop stuff, I don't say leave it. And
Oh,
just
yeah.
like
Yeah.
kind of leave it alone.
Oh, this is good for me. Oh, excuse me. Go ahead. If you wanted, so you can build in, what I was trying to do there, is if we want the dog to know that if something falls too, that's not automatically for them, then once they got this kind of figured out that they're not gonna try and take the food, then it can try and let the food fall. And if he does try and take it, then I'm gonna try and get it before he does. But if he, look at it, good boy. If he doesn't try and take it, then I'll let that. Good boy.
It's like, look how relaxed I am.
I know.
Wow. I'm so chill. He always does like he needs to kick the foot. It's like I'm so relaxed.
I do. It says I'm relaxing as hard as I can. Yeah, that's a good boy. That's a good boy, babe. So for him, and he's done a lot of training on this before, so he has an idea. He picks it up quickly, but he was wanting to just sit there and stare at it. So then I was starting to look for times where I could reward him for not actively staring at it. So when he was choosing to go around and visit a little bit, or just kind of wander around and check other things out, then he can be rewarded for that too. So it's not always,
So I'm not camping out.
yeah. Right? Yeah. Oh. Did this what it did? Good boy. That was a good boy. So that time when he went from me over that way, and he kind of looked on his way by, and then he looked away, that was really good. So he got a reward for that. Hey, didn't do it, I do. That I want to teach the dog, like if you put food down on a low coffee table or something, that the dog isn't going to try and dive on top of it. So that is a good exercise for that. If we're like on the higher counter, it's often a little bit easier for the dogs to start because if it's above their head and they have to actually jump to get it, then they get the idea of jumping versus not jumping at first. And then this, again, is just, oh, that was very nice. It's like, what did I do? Good. Ankle. So I rewarded him that time because he gave up on staring at the food for a little bit, and we went and explored a different part of the room. That's a bit of an example of what we were talking about earlier, that the dog kind of goes by the counter or the table area where normally they try and investigate, and they don't, they just kind of wander past. Then we could toss the reward for them. No. Oh my goodness. Poor Fennel. Ooh. Ooh. Did I get it to you? I didn't think so. Oh, I already did that. There you go. I know, right? It's all done. What was it?
Now he knows that's that chair.
That's right.
No, it's that chair. Okay, we're gonna